Bonjour tout le monde. So hello, I think I'm going to speak in English, right? So I'm happy to be here. It's the first time of the year, but also since last March actually, or the second time that I'm going outside of the office and my home, so to work. So it's great. And I would like to thank also Mathieu and Julien for trusting us and working with us for the last 2 years. And I think it's important to involve also large companies like Vinci and the foresight entity Leonard in what we're doing. So I'm here to talk about nature co-design. This is the kind of a new concept, a vision that we're pushing. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we started with deep tech. Now it's becoming maybe not mainstream, but many people are talking about it. So we are quite happy about it. And so nature co-design, it's kind of the follow-up. It's a maybe more precise vision that we are having. But before diving into this one, I would like to maybe go back to the broader vision, the broader view of deep tech. This is really Hello Tomorrow's playground. So I wanted to start with that. Basically, it's the fact that we can leverage many emerging technologies to solve some of our society's biggest issues. This is really what Hello Tomorrow is about. And I wanted to stress the fact that it is not only about the latest fancy new technology. It's really a revolution that has already started, and that everybody needs to pay attention to. Of course, it started with technologies like in digital, AI, quantum computing, maybe blockchain, also in life science with stem cells, with new tools to edit genes very precisely, like CRISPR, who got awarded to a French woman, Emmanuel Carpentier, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry last year. And there are also lots of advances in material science, in nanotech. So it's quite impressive to see that we have at the same time in digital, in life science, and in material science, very powerful technologies emerging and bringing first applications. And what's even more impressive is the fact that they are converging. Because today, since those technologies become more mature, for example, someone in computer engineering, if this person understands the basics of biology, this person could online edit and buy synthetic DNA. So we have this convergence that is possible. And on the other way around, many biologists also are leveraging AI in their work. So we see that those technologies are converging, and this is where we have the most powerful ideas that are coming up. And this really changes what is possible, meaning that, for example, we can now create a new type of organisms, bacteria, almost from scratch. We can solve problems using advanced computing in a few seconds, while before we could not even think about doing it. So it really changes what is possible and not. And it is really like if we were being back at the days where internet just started. You could imagine that at that time, nobody would think about social media, even less about how social media would influence elections, or that algorithms will choose the music you listen to. So I think we really need to understand that when we talk about deep tech, it's not just about the technology. It's really being back at this kind of beginning of a new cycle where it's impossible to even imagine what is about to come. And when we are in this kind of position where many things are uncertain and almost everything seems possible, it is even more important than ever to be able to explore while, of course, keeping to exploit the current business model. And this is something which can be difficult for large companies because the current business model is where the P&L is coming. So it's a powerful center of gravity. I won't go into details here because you know about that, and Leonard is the foresight entity of the Vinci group, so of course you're already tackling this problem. The point is that it is even more important than ever to really have these exploration capabilities. And to explore, we need to start by looking in one direction, to start exploring. And I think that's what we are here also to do, to help you look in some directions that we think are important. And the way we do that is we are leveraging all the startups that we see every year, that we evaluate every year. Some of them, you are evaluating them as well together with us. And basically, those startups are at the frontier between research and commercial applications. So it means that it's kind of the weak signals of what is about to maybe become mainstreams in a few years that already exist today, but that is not under the radars of most people, most organizations. And what we are doing also is to kind of connect the dots to try to identify what are, according to us, the most important trends that we need to look into. As I said, deep tech is kind of the general framework and vision and trend that we are looking into. This is our global playground. And natural co-design is, it's not as meta as deep tech, but it's still kind of a general trend. And then I think Nico is going to talk about more specific trends. And in the end, you will end up with startups pitching, which will be actually concrete examples of those trends. So we will start from the kind of the meta and end up with specific examples. So let's start with natural co-design. What is natural co-design? So it's the ability to use nature. We have always been using nature because anyway we are part of it, and we have always been extracting and refining raw material that we find in our natural environment. But the difference with natural co-design is that we don't only extract and refine nature's raw materials, but we can leverage the raw forces and mechanisms to directly build the building blocks of our industries, starting from atoms and small molecules, which we will see later brings more efficiency, speed, and potential cost reductions. There is also, besides the manufacturing part, the idea that also for the design of the new product, we kind of can move from serendipity, so from trying many things. For example, in the healthcare industry, usually how we find drugs is that we scan many potential molecules and then eventually we find some interesting ones. Here, since we start to understand enough how the science of our world, of nature, we can kind of retro-engineer and start from the problem we want to target, design the specifications of the molecule we want to find, and engineer the right molecule or proteins from scratch, even if they don't exist in our natural environments. So this, we will see some concrete examples, but this is really a paradigm shift. And what makes it possible? Why we didn't do that before? So what makes it possible is our understanding of nature's forces, mechanisms, basically science, and all the technological advances, specifically in biotech, in material science, in AI, and the convergence of the technologies. And we'll see that it's going to have a huge impact economically and also in terms of how we approach value chains, so not only in terms of size of the market, but also in how we approach them. It might sound quite theoretical until now, so I will try to really now go to specific examples. And I think one you can all relate to is the COVID vaccines. You might know that today the first two vaccines, and actually the two only vaccines that are authorized in France, are based on RNA. What it means is that compared to the, let's say, traditional approach where we try we test many different versions of the virus that have been modified to make it harmless. And we see if some of those versions will trigger an immune response from our cells and be effectively harmless. Here, it's quite different. On the design part, we start from the immune response mechanisms to identify which protein from the vaccines might trigger that. And then, so we start from the problem or what we want it to do. And then also the way we build this vaccine is quite different, because instead of basically injecting the virus or the proteins themselves in our body, what we inject is only a blueprint. So it's only the genetic material that is coding. So it's the blueprint for the protein that will trigger the immune response. So what it means is that it's basically our body, our cells, that will be the living factories that will produce the vaccine or the protein that will trigger the immune response. And what we inject, it's only the blueprint of this protein. So it's a different approach to design it, but also to manufacture it. Another example quickly, also in healthcare. It's a speaker from the latest Hello Tumor Summit. So you can go back to the platform and look for Neuritas and their presentation. They identify new molecules that have the potential to solve human health issues. And the traditional approach to do that, as I was explaining, is to start from the trillions of molecules that exist in our natural environment, screen them through trial and error, and eventually identify some that have interesting properties. The problem with this approach is that it takes decades to find those new molecules, and therefore it is very expensive. The new approach, that is the nature co-design approach, it's to start from the problem, so consumer needs and healthcare issues, and leveraging our understanding of the biological mechanisms and the science of proteins, proteinomics. I mean, we can kind of do the specifications of what should the right molecule look like, should it solve the issues we identified. And then we start from those specifications to build some molecules, even if they don't exist in nature. Then we test them very efficiently using robotics in the labs. And then we learn also using artificial intelligence to make sense of the huge amount of data that is produced by those experiments. And thanks to artificial intelligence also, we can quickly get actionable feedback that will be used to change the design of the molecules that we produce, therefore closing this loop. And closing this feedback loop, thanks to the convergence of all those technologies, it allows Neuritas to bring down the time to produce new molecules, new drugs, from decades to 2.5 years. We see that the vaccines, we produced it in less than 1 year, while usually it's more than 10 years, and also at a fraction of the cost. So you can imagine the consequences that it's going to have on our healthcare. And it's not only about healthcare. It's also, for example, for material science. Here, Cubotics, it's a startup using exactly the same feedback loop to automatize the research for new chemical compounds that will have specific properties that we are looking for. So exactly the same idea and the same concept is applying not only in life science, but also in material science. So that's more for the design part. So that's what I was saying when I was talking about nature as a design platform. So leveraging really our deep understanding of nature and technologies to design kind of from scratch new compounds according to the properties we are looking for. But as I was saying, we can also use nature now as an engineering platform. If we take the example of plastics, we can again compare for plastic production what would be on the left side, kind of the traditional approach, what we've been doing in the past and what is still being done today mostly. Maybe you can have a quick look at, because maybe it's a bit complex. The scale on the left is the complexity of the structure that we are producing. So from the atoms on the bottom to small and big molecules, and then the macrostructure. So how it's done mostly today is that nature is so starting from CO2, water, and sun's energy, so other molecules and atoms. Of course, so the plants and animals are building some more complex molecules, and then when they die, especially in the swamps, with millions years of heat and pressure transformation, it becomes crude oil, and then starts our industry, so humans transformation. So we take crude oil and we extract it, we refine it, then there is the cracking to get some smaller, commercially interesting molecules, like the one that are listed here, like ethylene, propylene, and so on. And then we do polymerization, and we transform this plastic through molding, casting, and so on. So I don't know if it's going to be the new way of doing that, but it's already existing. And here there are some examples of startups like LanzaTech. They also did a presentation at the Heliotromo Summit in November. So I also invite you to go back to the platform and look for LanzaTech. You can search on the platform for the speakers. And I think if you look for LanzaTech, we'll find their speech. So they are already doing it, and it's only one example. There are like many other examples. So what they are doing is that they directly build those commercially viable molecules that we start from in our industry, from CO2 and water and other compounds that we find in our environments. So they don't start from the raw material that has been kind of created by nature. They directly create those industrial building blocks from scratch, or not from scratch, but from like atoms and molecules. And that's really interesting because it means that it requires less energy. So you don't have this whole process of, it's also faster. You save basically millions of years because you don't need to wait for Earth to create crude oil. And also it allows to directly use industrial waste, industrial carbon dioxide waste to create plastic. So it means that we can upcycle CO2 and transform it into plastic. So it creates a totally different value chain and allows also to really transform waste into resources. And here, one of the worst possible waste, carbon dioxide, which is the main responsible for climate change. And this is one example for plastic production. I think I won't go into the details for all of them, but same thing for meat. So instead of waiting for nature or for cows to grow meat and then butchering them to get beef, why not directly creating beef in the labs or in factories today through cellular agriculture or synthetic blood production through yeast. Again, many examples. If you want me to dive into one of those examples, we can do it later. But it's just to show that it's also the same for silk production or leather production, also for cement production, also for energy. So rather than using sun's energy or wind fossil fuels or plants, which are derivatives of sun's energy in the end, we can directly build our own sun. So that's nuclear fusion. to create our own energy. So here again, we kind of go more upstream in nature and play almost the role of nature ourselves, using now that we can master nature's raw forces and mechanisms. So you get it. I could do that for I think all the industries and potentially a list of hundreds of applications. The pattern is this one. Rather than instead of using nature as a raw material, we leverage its forces and processes to build our own industry's building block, starting directly from atoms and small molecules. And it's saving time, energy, money, maybe not today, but tomorrow when it will become more mature. It is more sustainable. And it allows also to create new products because it means we are not limited anymore, constrained anymore by what we can find in our environment. We can create anything we want, starting from atoms and small molecules. So it has a huge economical potential. The BCG with whom we are working to push this concept has estimated it to be 40% of the global domestic product at the worldwide level, excepting services, represented more than $30 trillion. So it's a huge market. It definitely concerns energy and utilities, food and agriculture, healthcare. The list could be much longer, so pretty much all industries. And it's going to be at different level of the value chain. The sourcing, of course, the manufacturing, definitely, but also by creating different kind of outputs. And it's not only the size of the market, which is impressive, but it's also the type of transformation that it is gonna have. So I was starting to talk about it with CO2 that can really become a resources from a waste to a resource. So really making circular economy not just a dream, but a reality at scale. Imagine if we can really upcycle all the CO2 emissions from our industry. It's also different economies of scale because nature is not a linear process, and the optimal production size is not necessarily the biggest one. So it means that we are going to have also different optimal production size and also location, because we might not also need to have the factories close to where the electricity is the cheapest if there is not much energy needed, or close to where the raw material is extracted if we don't start from raw material that we extract. So maybe it's going to be more close to the customers, or the rationales to decide to decide the industrial footprint will be different. And also, it might lead to less importance of large building, physical pipelines, trucks, and ships, if the only thing that moves from one place to the other, from one factory to the other, is kind of the digital blueprint, for example, of new yeast or bacteria, or 3D printing products, and so on. So you might tell me that this is all hypothetical, and although every example that I gave, it's not science fiction. That everything it's already done, so it does exist, but not at scale. It's still, for most of those products, it's still too expensive to be on the market on the large scale. But the first answer I would give is that while those technologies becomes exponentially cheaper, for example, that the first human genome to be sequenced costed $8 billion, like 10 years ago or something like that. Today, it's you can get your genome sequence on the internet for less than $100. So you see how the price has been reduced. So Same thing with AI and so on. So with those technologies becoming more mature and cheaper, the cost also of natural co-design is decreasing. And if it started in healthcare, because in healthcare, we don't really have any limit to what we are ready to pay for a new solution, then more and more type of products will become commercially available. Now, agriculture is becoming kind of also the hot market for natural co-design. And actually, we've been working recently with a client in healthcare that is using his biotech capabilities to move into agriculture. Eventually, even like building, I don't know, like any plastic product or even clothes might be cheaper to do using natural co-design rather than the traditional industrial process. And another interesting example is, for example, Microsoft. They have a team, a synthetic biology team in Cambridge in the UK. So what the hell is doing Microsoft in biotech, you may ask? They are exploring because they are working on biological computing and data storage. So it's totally different from the traditional business model, but that's the whole point. While they are exploiting their current business model, they are preparing for the future. They are exploring other way of doing what they do basically. I think I will end with this message that even if there are still many uncertainties, it is really the time to explore. And for example, the time to explore in this direction of natural co-design. And actually, it's because it's still so much uncertain that we need to explore. It's really an imperative to just be relevant in the next decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnaud. I told you, stay with me maybe just for a couple of questions. I told you, right, that this speech would open up like large and deep avenues. And actually, it's not only an industrial change that you're announcing, it's also a whole civilizational change, you could say. I'd like to get back on what you told us and reflect a couple of the questions that were shared in the chat. Well, the first one is actually a question of mine. We're particularly interested here in how our industry and especially construction can evolve. You mentioned, but maybe a little too quickly, the question of cement production. Could you get back on this and maybe use this example to get a little more in depth about how you collect those atoms and small molecules in the first place?
Yep. So in this example, so it's for example, this startup Biomason, what they are doing is instead of using limestone and clay and other compounds to create cement, I won't go into the industrial process because you know it much better than me. They are using cells that basically, if you think about it, limestone, it's living organisms that have been collecting atoms and small molecules from their environments a long time ago, and then they died, and then it's sedimentation who produced the limestone. Here, we own this process, meaning that we are doing, we engineer some microorganisms to do exactly the same thing, meaning to look for molecules, atoms in their environment to create this limestone. And what they are doing is that basically they are using some ingredients like it can be waste from construction sites where you have all the ingredients that those microorganisms will need to build this limestone, and then they are mixing that with water and with the microorganisms in a batch that have the size of a construction building block. So they are able to, I think it's in the, I think, and so they are able to build those construction building blocks basically disrupting and shifting the whole traditional process. So starting from ingredients that we can find in our environments, or it can be waste from construction sites, water, and those microorganisms. And then, what they have is kind of bricks, limestone bricks. So they are not able today. Maybe it's not fit to build a whole huge building, but they are already creating houses with this technology, for example. And in here, the value is it's more in the microorganisms itself than the industrial process, because there is no factory, there is no big industrial process. It's pretty simple.
Okay, that's fascinating. I'm sure that a lot of us are going to skim through and try to collect more information about biomason. Thank you. Just maybe one last question. That would be a more business-wise question. Would be, well, you took care to warn us that most of these solutions still need to scale, and of course it's going to be a big issue. But if I was, for example, a business leader envisaging and wanting to prepare for the conversion of my business, where should I start with, knowing that maybe some applications of these technologies might be quite remote?
It's true that it's of course it's not because it's still uncertain that we don't have to move, because if we move when it's certain, it's too late, because it means that other people made it certain. So what to do concretely? I think it depends on how much related to your industry it will be. I think the really first thing to do is to identify, to understand the potential of those emerging technologies, look at the use case. They can be in your industry, in other industries, and then have an idea of how important it is for you to invest in them. Sometimes it's going to be just maybe doing some business intelligence, just get up to date about the latest development, what technology roadblocks remain, and kind of just to make sure that you are not surprised. In other, maybe you will need to develop your own internal capacity, developing it or buying a startup or whatever. But yes, really the first thing is to stay open. I think that's why Leonard is made for, and I think that's also why we're working together. I think that's basically that's why some companies are working with us. It's really to keep an eye open on all those emerging technologies, understand their trends. So that's the first thing to do, and then. Well, there are many different options. Like Microsoft, they invested themselves. They have their own internal team doing synthetic biology. Some organizations are thinking already of having a chief biology officer. Definitely in agriculture, life science, it's a no-brainer. It's very important. In your industry, it might be, I don't know. So it's the first thing is understanding the impacts, and then depending on how impactful they will be different strategies to get ready.
Okay, thank you. I can see Julien Villalongue and Guillaume Bazoin right there behind the camera. They're right in discussion. Maybe they're just considering opening a lab here at Leonard soon. Thank you again, Arnaud.
Thank you.
It's been